Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet Nasta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttamasoke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistaki. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supremmost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, and Srila Prabhupada, the translator and commentator. By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering service unto the pure devotees, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed. And loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So Srimad Bhagavatam, sometimes you get parts of the Bhagavatam that are just like totally nectar, and different people are attracted by different pastimes or different things. And sometimes you get these sections of the Bhagavatam that the philosophy is very dense. And it almost appears like, perhaps for some of us, it appears like I don't understand a bit of what they're saying. And then you think, well, why are these things mentioned in the Bhagavatam? Why is it so heavy? This happened, and then the ego comes, and then goodness, and then this, and it's all of these things. Even if they apparently at this particular stage in our progression don't make a whole lot of sense, or we don't comprehend it fully, or even understand how it pretty much applies to our daily life in Krishna consciousness, still they're purifying to the heart. They're purifying to the heart and the consciousness. And this process, what Kapila Dev's now explaining to his mother Devahuti, parts of it, is how the elements and how the principles of the creation came into effect, and how one thing is the cause of another thing, is the cause of another thing, is the cause of another thing. And that principle of understanding the cause of creation, that's very important. If you've noticed, here we are in the third canto. If you notice, the process of creation has been described at least 9 times already, at least 9 times. And it's different, and it's often appears different, but sometimes it's just different angles or different perspectives on the same principles that are happening. But the basic lesson, one of the basic lessons that we're meant to take from these sections, is that there's a supreme controller, is that the Lord is in charge of everything, is that the Lord has his potencies are there behind everything. And one might think, well, okay, just tell me that God is great. That's that that's true. That's good. Now I understand God is great. But to understand, that's a very general term. Very general term, God is great. And we've probably heard it from our different walks of life previous to coming to Christian consciousness and accepted it. Yeah, God is great. But to see how he's great, like one time, if you take uh, like a piece of cardboard or a piece of paper, a real thick piece of paper, and you put one pinhole in it, and then you try to look through the world through that one pinhole, you'll see some things, but obviously it's very limited. So that understanding that God is great, that general terminology that God is great, is like looking through that little pinhole on that cardboard, thinking, oh yeah, I understand how God is great. But these things give us a whoa. They, even if our consciousness can't wrap itself around it, at least it expands our concept of what it is that God is great, and how it is that he's in control of everything, and how it is that our connection to the Lord is through service. Our connection to the Lord is through service. And when we're connected, just that simple examples that Srila Prabhupada gives about the hand being connected to the body, the fingers being connected to the hand, how they work so nicely when they're connected. And they don't work so nicely when they're not connected, you know, that concept. how we as individual jiva living entities function, and our happiness and everything that we get is so much more in sync when we're connected with the Lord through service, through understanding His glories, through understanding how His hand is in everything. That's just the preliminary introduction. Okay. Om Agnate Mirandasya Jananjana Salakaya Chaksu Umilitam Jaina Tasmai Shigurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and the spiritual master very kindly forced open my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I am therefore indebted to Srila Prabhupada forever and beg for service life after life at his lotus feet, because his lotus feet are at Krishna's lotus feet. That covers everything. Okay, so let's just read through our verses, starting with 19. We're going from 19 to 32. We'll go around the room. As you're well aware, it's a mindful. These verses are a mouthful and a mindful. So we'll just start, and you get to start because you're ready. Good girl. Thank you.
After the Supreme Personality of Godhead impregnates material nature with this internal potency, material nature delivers the sum total of the cosmic intelligence, which is known as Hiranmaya. This takes place in material nature when she is agitated by the destinations of the conditioned souls.
Thus, after manifesting variegatedness, the effulgent Mahatattva, which contains all the universes within itself, which is the root of all cosmic manifestations, and which is not destroyed at the time of annihilation, swallows the darkness that covered the effulgence of the time of dissolution.
Okay, let's not go that fast. Okay, now, would you like to summarize what your verse was? Just summarize. Can you remember? It's hard. Give her the microphone because she's going to remember some things. What you understood.
Something about Maya being agitated.
Maya being agitated, yep. And something about the sum total. Remember that part? What that concept? Even if you don't remember the exact words, do you remember the concept? Or anybody? Sorry, just to put you on the spot. Okay. Anybody remember the concept that was there? Go up tonight. Oh, there you go. Okay. Yes, Prabhu. I think does he have? Oh, he got
with his material nature. He creates. That's what it says. God, the supreme personality of Godhead, impregnates material nature with his internal potency. And then, at the time of dissolution, it said that the effulgence still stays there.
Yeah.
I remember reading somewhere also that like when it ends, he still has like a baby on the waters of devastation or something like
What's
that.
he doing with his foot?
He's like trying to eat his foot, like
suck his toe. And you know why he's trying to suck his toe? Do you know why? What's behind that?
I don't really remember, but I remember there was like a Rishi who was like in the water watching him.
Oh, Rishi, yes, yeah.
I forgot.
Markandeya Rishi.
Yeah.
Okay, so he was trying to taste the flavor of his lotus feet, because we say the Lord's lotus feet are so sweet. It's so sweet to take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. So he's sucking his toe like a little babies do those things. If you notice, they're very agile, and their feet can go up to their mouth very agilely, but not later on in years. Not so. Anyway, but he's trying to taste the sweetness. What is that sweetness? He wants to understand. But okay, thank you for that. But so so you kind of summarized two verses there, but that's okay. That first one, 19. Material nature delivers the sum total of the cosmic intelligence, which is known as Hiranmaya. Wow. This takes place in material nature when she is agitated by the destinations of the conditioned souls. So we hear about this principle of creation over and over again. And the point about creation is that it happens over and over again. When we just say the word creation, we're thinking it's the first time. Well, it's the first time for that time to be created, but creation, that energy of creation, the energy of manifesting the material universes, and the energy of providing the living entities with bodies happens over and over again. So the creation, yes, it's the start of that time frame, yes, but the living entities exist eternally, which we can say that so fast. Living entities never born, he's eternal. But when you think about that, like that concept eternally, because we're always thinking of a beginning, a middle, of an end in our experience here in the material world. Anyway, so the creation, the living entities exist eternally. That means they existed prior to that creation. That means they existed and performed activities prior to that creation and accumulated karmic actions and reactions, and now are born again or impregnated into material nature again one more time with the same karmic results that they accrued, each individual personality, same karmic results that they accrued through the previous creation, and they are been sleeping inside the body of Mahavishnu for millions of years, 400 and something billion years. They come out again and they're like woke, just like when we go to bed at night and you dream of whatever you dream about, or if you're fortunate enough, you just go to sleep and totally conk out and don't even dream too much. But anyway, when you wake up in the morning, you remember, okay, today's Tuesday. I have to do this and this and this on Tuesday. Because why? Because on Monday you had so many things and then they continue over to Tuesday. Similarly, creation. So the sum total of the cosmic intelligence and cosmic karmic thing, they're born again to again pursue the same desires. Now, the same desires doesn't necessarily mean in this life I wanted a Ferrari, so in my next life I'm going to want a Ferrari, but I'm going to want a vehicle. I'm going to want something fast. I'm going to want something expensive. I want to achieve some sort of thing. So in that same category of desire, mostly under name, fame, and profit and adoration, and I, me, and mine, I'm going to want that again, and I'm going to pursue it again. And unfortunately, if that's our only desires and goals and dreams in life, then become more and more entangled for future births and future creations. Is that a question or yes?
Yeah,
or a comment? Either one, those are welcome. Yes.
I did have a question. Just to clarify, we hear a lot about creation, and specifically, like, there's the creation from Brahma when he creates this universe. The creation we're talking about, and he partially disputes it every 12 hours. But the creation we're talking about is like the Maha creation with Vishnu.
Yep.
He breathes in and breathes out.
Right.
That's the universe.
Right. Right. The categories of creation are called Sarga and Visarga. Krishna creates the elements. He creates the elements, which is before Brahma. Brahma takes those elements and this and that, and he arranges it. That's Visarga, Sarga and Visarga. So you're correct in that assessment. So there's the and this is where we're at, the creation of the elements of the universe. Okay, we're on 21 now. And if you have questions or comments, that's fine. We'll go on. 21, please, somebody.
The mode of goodness, which is the clear, sober status of understanding the personality of Godhead, and which is generally called Vasudeva, or consciousness, becomes manifest in the Mahatattva.
And just a little quick comment, hopefully. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. That's that's okay. But that's who we're praying to, the Lord of Consciousness, Vasudeva. Here it says he's the sober status of understanding the personality of God, which is the mode of goodness, is generally called Vasudeva. Vasudeva is in charge of consciousness, and we're praying to the Lord of Consciousness to please bless us, that we might be able to understand and imbibe and take to heart our the words of the Bhagavatam, the instructions of the Bhagavatam. Okay, 22.
After the manifestation of the Mahatattva, these features appear simultaneously as water in its natural state, before coming in contact with earth is clear, sweet, and unruffled. So the characteristic traits of pure consciousness are complete serenity, clarity, and freedom from distraction.
Wow, I wonder what that feels like. It's been a long time for me. Okay, 23, 24. We're going to speak about this verse, but we're going to go through all our verses and come back to verses 23 and 24. Somebody.
The material ego springs up from the Mahatattva, which evolved from the Lord's own energy. The material ego is endowed predominantly with active power of the three kinds: good, passionate, and ignorant. It is from these three types of material ego that the mind, the senses of perception, the organs of action, and the gross elements evolve.
There's a mouthful there. We'll come back to this verse. Um, next one, please.
The threefold ahankaras, the source of the gross elements, the senses and the mind, is identical with them because it is their cause. It is known by the name of some. It is known by the name of Sankarsana, who is directly Lord Ananta with 1,000 heads.
So these modes, the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance, this is why there's so much variety in the world. There influences that influence the living entity. Goodness has its certain characteristics of serenity, clear consciousness, etc., etc. Passion has its um, characteristics of intense endeavor. Ignorance has its characteristics of dullness and ignorance, and they combine in unlimited ways. Lots of goodness, a little bit of passion, a little bit of, lots of goodness, medium amount of passion, and a touch of ignorance, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All those millions of different combinations. So one of the things that results from that is there's no two people alike. Even when twins are born, even when identical twins are born, they have different characteristics as they grow up. They might have very similar physical characteristics at the starting point, but they have different personality traits and different um, so many things and characteristics about them. So there's so much variety. Now take that understanding and try to come to the conclusion of it's all one. How do they get there? How does an impersonalist come to that point? It's all one. There's no variety. There's so much variety, and yet in perfection, according to that philosophy, there's no body, no differentiation, no this, no that. But anyway, that's why this information, although hard to digest at first, but it gives us um, more philosophical understanding also, so that we are not misled by deviant philosophies. Okay, 27, please.
From the false ego of goodness, another transformation takes place. From this evolved mind, whose thoughts and reflections give rise to desire.
There's a lot to be said about that one too. Like, for example, from the mind whose thoughts and reflections give rise to desire. So in Srila Prabhupada's Nectar of Devotion, being the summary of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, it's explained, that verse from the Padma Purana that explains how sinful activities evolve. They first arise from ignorance, and from ignorance without realizing what your desires are going to accomplish. If you're ignorant about what your endeavors are going to accomplish, then you don't have any discrimination what is right or wrong. You can't just you don't see that there are some activities that are going to bring good results, and some activities are going to bring binding results. And what does that mean? Binding results means that the consciousness becomes covered and covered and covered. It becomes duller and duller and duller, and therefore anything goes, more or less. There's no discrimination how to treat people properly, how to treat animals properly. There's no discrimination of personal activities, and therefore things we become bound and bound and bound very tightly by those gunas, the three ropes, the ropes of material nature. Anyway, I was going on that. Ignorance is the cause of sinful activities because from ignorance we have desires. we develop desires, and when and it doesn't just stop with a desire. A desire meditated upon becomes an action. We act to fulfill that desire. So from ignorance, then there's sinful desires. From sinful desires, then there's sinful activities. From sinful activities, then there's results for that, and that we've discussed briefly, and I've talked about briefly in other classes. From sinful activities, then there's two types of reaction. There's the immediate reaction of possible mental anxiety that you did something wrong, and more probable some reaction from uh, some punishment from acting wrong. But then there's the subtle result. The subtle result of sinful activities is the desire to do it again. It's all nothing's happening by chance. It's all very planned. There's a huge organization and hierarchical system in this creation. So that desire to do that sinful activity or a similar sinful activity again repeats that entanglement and suffering and more ignorance. And when one acts in the mode of goodness, or Shuddha Sattva, in the transcendental mode of goodness, then the consciousness becomes clear. And we see things in a clarified way with Krishna in the center, or Krishna's hand behind things. And then we act in a certain, or try to act in a certain way that is in alliance, in accordance with his desires. And that, although activity is here in the mode of goodness, or even Shuddha Sattva, transcendental mode, activities there in the mode of ignorance, the result of those activities is completely different. Completely different. One is enlightening and elevating, and one is brings one more to darkness and ignorance and more suffering. And while we're sitting here, and at least contemplating it and talking about these things, it's very clear. It's clear to understand the result of these things. But when you're out and about, and this desire comes and that desire comes, it gets a little more muddled. And you can see the force, their pushings, their vegas, they're pushing on us to do things that in our proper state of thoughtfulness we wouldn't do. So we have to, that's why it's good to hear the things. It's good to get the information, at least have it in your pocket, at least have it somewhere in your psyche, so that hopefully we can pull it out and guide ourselves by it. Okay, Hare Krishna, let's go on. We're on what, 20? We're on 30 now, or which one? 28, okay, thanks. 28.
The mind of the living entity is known by the name of Lord Aniruddha, the supreme ruler of the senses. He possesses a bluish-black form resembling a lotus flower growing in the autumn. He is found slowly by the yogis.
So this is referring to the Paramatma feature of the Lord, that the yogis, they're seeing the Lord in his different forms in the heart, and Prabhupada explains that that's a bona fide process of self-realization, to see the Lord in the heart, but it takes a long time, and not everybody's inclined or qualified for understanding that. Yes.
Sometimes we hear that there's 3 tiers of realization, like of impersonal, Paramama, and Navama. So yeah, is Paramama less than Navama?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. There are levels, 3 stages of realization. They're all bona fide, and they're all steps towards perfection. Paramatma realization is an advanced state of realization. To understand the Lord in the heart is an advanced state of realization. More advanced. Okay, more advanced than that is to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, because it includes the Paramatma realization and includes realization of Krishna's impersonal um, energies also. So it's the most complete because it contains all other stages of realization. Okay, next.
By transformation of the policy and passion, intelligence takes birth, or virtuous lady.
Who's the virtuous lady? Do you know? Okay, go ahead.
The function of intelligence are to help into ascertain the nature of objects when they come into view and to help the senses.
Anything seem unusual in that verse to you? To me, by transformation of the false ego in passion, intelligence takes birth. Interesting, right? Anyway, it's all very interesting. And your homework assignment is to read the purports to all these verses some point, because they all have more clarification there. Okay, 30.
Doubt, misapprehension, correct apprehension, memory, and sleep, as determined by the different functions, are said to be the distinct characteristics of the intelligence.
Now that's an interesting one, right? Doubt is a characteristic of intelligence. In other words, we're not meant to take things blindly. You know, we're meant to try to understand them in this way and that way and this way. So doubts are not bad, but they need to be dealt with. And they need to be expressed. They need to be clarified. 31.
Egoism in the mode of passion produces two kinds of senses: the senses for acquiring knowledge and the sense of action. The senses of actions depend on the vital energy, and the senses for acquiring knowledge depend on intelligence.
Everything's connected to everything. And our last verse of the day.
When egoism is in ignorance is agitated by the sex energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, subtle element sound is manifested. From sound come the ethereal sky in the sense of hearing.
Yep. Like here again, now let's take another step back, even from the specifics of this verse. What's happening? We're talking about the Sarga creation, the creation of the Lord, so that Lord Brahma can take those elements and he can develop the planetary systems and the places of habitations for the living entities. So all of the things that we take for granted, sound, sight, this and that, they're at a certain point in the Lord's creation, they're manifested in different ways. And somehow egoism, no, we're in ignorance, the subtle energy of sound is manifested, agitated by the energy of the Supreme One. How'd it go? It's beyond me. Okay, let's go back now to 23, 24. That's our verse for today, the one that we're going to emphasize and really clear up, make it really clear. Ha, ha, ha. Okay. Can you feel comfortable chanting the verse together? Just the Sanskrit one time together? We'll go on a little bit slow level and then it'll work. Mahat Tatvad Vikurvanad Bhagavad Virya Sambhavat Kriya Shaktir Ahankaras Trividha Samapadyata Vaikarikas Tajasascha Tamasascha Yato Bhavaha Manasaschendriyamanacha Bhutana Mahatim Api. Okay, I'll just read the word for word. Mahatattva is from the Mahatattva. Vikurvanat, undergoing a change. Bhagavat Virya, Sambhavat, evolved from the Lord's own energy. Kriya Shakti, endowed with active power. Ahankara, the material ego. Trividha, of the three kinds. Samapadyata, sprang up Vikarika, material ego in transformed goodness, Taijasa, material ego in passion, Cha and Tamasa, material ego in ignorance, Cha also Yata, from which Bhava, the origin, Manasa, of the mind, Cha and Indriyanam, of the senses for perception and action, Cha and Bhutanam Mahatam, of the five gross elements, Api also. So can somebody read the verse, please? Once more. Do you have a mic that we need to pass a mic in the back? There you go.
The material ego springs up from the Mahatattva, which evolved from the Lord's own energy. The material ego is endowed predominantly with active power of three kinds: good, passionate, and ignorant. It is from these three types of material ego that the mind, the senses of perception, the organs of action, and the gross elements evolve.
So that was what was explained. Hold on, because you're going to read the purport too a little bit. That was what was explained in the subsequent verses that we were reading. Okay, start with the first couple of sentences, please, of the purport, Srila Prabhupada's purport.
In the beginning, from clear consciousness, or the pure state of Krishna consciousness, the first contamination sprang up. This is called false ego, or identification of the body as self.
Okay. So if you remember hearing, and I'm sure you've heard many times, that the living entities, the jivas, are called the marginal potency, tatasta potency. They're part of the. Krishna has his internal potency, he has his external potency, and he has his marginal potency. So marginal potency, it's kind of obvious. It means it can go either way, just like the shore of the ocean. The ocean comes in, and the waves run to the shore, and there's a certain point. There's a certain point along the shoreline that's sometimes wet when the waves reach up, and sometimes it's dry when the waves pull back. So the living entity, the jiva, the individual soul, the us, the real us, has the choice to turn towards Krishna, to serve Krishna and stay connected like that, or to think, I want to be independent. I want to try to enjoy on my own. Why do I have to serve Krishna? So that choice is there. Sometimes the question comes up, why does Krishna give us this choice? Why doesn't he just make us love him? Well, he could do that, but that's not really the basis of love. Real love is voluntary. So we've heard all of these things in a theoretical platform before, but that's what's being talked about here. The living entity's consciousness in connection with Krishna is pure. But when they decide, when that person or that jiva decides to turn away from the Supreme Lord, then then is the beginning of contaminated consciousness. Because we're not thinking of ourselves in connection with the Lord, we're thinking separate. So when we start to think separate from the Lord, thinking that I'm separate from the Lord, then that false ego comes in starts to manifest its ugly little head, you know. And then it gets influenced by goodness. In the beginning, the influence is very slight, and the living entity is serene and pure and this and that. And but gradually, again, by activities in materialistic life, becomes covered by the reaction, the desire to do it again, and the consciousness becomes more and more contaminated, and it becomes much more difficult to see that we're even connected to the Lord. We are connected to the Lord even in contaminated consciousness, but we don't see that connection. And now we're at least in the stage of waking up to our connection to the Lord and trying to turn back to him, and at least trying to see our connection with the Lord. Okay, this is called false ego, or identification of the body as the self. Okay, another couple of sentences, anybody, or you can do it, please. If you want. You got the mic?
Yeah.
Okay, another couple of sentences.
The living entity exists in the natural state of Krishna consciousness.
But he has marginal independence, and this allows him to forget Krishna.
Okay, that's way lot. Right? So that's Krishna's kindness there. He doesn't force us to love him. He's neutral. It's not neutral. Okay, neutral doesn't mean that he doesn't care. He still cares about us, and he still facilitates. In fact, why are we here? Because he cares about us, and he's created this atmosphere that we can try to be happy in, us separate from him. And one can look around and think, how's it working out for everybody? Not so well, right? There's wars and this and that and disruptions and big things and little things all the time. There's freezing weather, there's this, so many things. There's, disappointments in so many ways because we've removed ourselves from our connection with Krishna. But Krishna, again, that's one of his characteristics. His characteristic is that he gives the living entity the opportunity to choose. He's neutral in that sense. He gives the opportunity to the living entity to choose. Do you want to serve him? Do you want to try to serve him? Do you want to try to enjoy separately? And when one wants to try to serve Krishna, Krishna gives all facility. He's giving so much facility. And you see, so many people are inclined to different processes of religion, and they're getting some connection with God. They're getting some connection with God. But somehow or other, we've been somehow or other so fortunate to get a connection with God that's so appealing, so fulfilling, and such complete knowledge of that connection of God. And that's Krishna's help. Krishna's helping the living entities all along. Okay, go ahead, please.
Originally, pure Krishna consciousness exists, but because of misuse of marginal independence, there is a chance of forgetting Krishna. This is exhibited in actual life. There are many instances in which someone acting in Krishna consciousness suddenly changes.
Okay, that can be taken two ways. When somebody's in Krishna consciousness, they change. Or we can say now, like looking at it in one perspective, when we come to Krishna consciousness, we change a lot compared to what we were doing previously. You know, we have some good experiences in Krishna consciousness, some good experiences by reading Srila Prabhupada's books, by associating with devotees, and our perspective of things changed completely compared to what they were previous state of ignorance. But also it means that somebody in Krishna somebody aspiring for Krishna consciousness can also be overcome by ignorance and change in again towards their attraction to material energy, because that attraction is very strong. It's very, very strong. The desire to enjoy separate from Krishna. Why is it so strong? Because we've been doing it for so long. We've been trying for so long. It's not that we've just been doing it in these 20 years or 30 years or 100 years of this life, or just a few bursts, but millions. Like, again, we're speaking of creation, the beginning of time. And that isn't even the first time that we tried. That was just the beginning of this creation. What about the previous billions of ones that we've been in? Because why? Because we're eternal. So that the false conceptions are also very hard to um, um, overcome. But what's the verse in the Bhagavad Gita that gives us hope on overcoming our bad impressions and taking up good impressions as that easier? They're easier to take up the good things and give up the bad things. Param, thanks. Param dristva nivartate. Krishna says in the Gita. He says that it's much easier to give up sinful or lower taste when you have a higher taste. But just by gritting your teeth and say, I'm going to stop, I'm going to stop, I'm going to stop, that's not the most effective way to give up lower activities. But by experiencing a higher taste, by experiencing the pleasure of taking prasadam and the different wonderful tastes of prasadam, then it's very easy, and understanding philosophically about the results of what you eat and who we might have eaten in the past, or the results of that, then theoretically it's easier, theoretically understanding the theory, but also the experience of taking the prasadam makes it much easier, you know. So param dristva nivartate. But someone can lose that higher taste by different activities, offensives or this or that, and then change from their apparently steady course of Krishna consciousness and temporarily take a step or two back or a life or two back. And but what was the verse that we said in the beginning of class that gives us hope that those back steps that we take are not totally destructive? When we talk about the result of hearing the Bhagavatam, every time we hear the Bhagavatam has some good result, and then what?
There's no loss.
Yeah, irrevocable. The progress that one makes, even if there is a setback, even if there's a serious setback, which sometimes there are serious setbacks. Someone has risen to a very responsible high position, and for various reasons there's a setback, and they go away. Apparently, for in this whole life they go away, don't come back. But whatever progress they've made is uh, always to their credit. That's another thing. In one sense, from one perspective, materially, it looks like the cards are stacked against us, right? Materially. But if you have another perspective, if you have the Krishna conscious perspective, you see that Krishna stacked the cards in our favor also. Because we're making some endeavor to chant Hare Krishna, because we're making some endeavor to improve our consciousness, and that endeavor, however meager or great it might be, is never lost, the cards are stacked, the Krishna cards are stacked in our favor. So it's all a question of perspective. Anyway, Hare Krishna. All right. Continue on. Somebody else continue on with the purport. Yeah, go ahead. Microphone over here. Please and thank you. I think we're in this is, right? No, suddenly changes. Yeah, in the Upanishads. You're correct. You're right. Yeah, sorry.
In the Upanishads, it is therefore stated that the path of spiritual realization is just like the sharp edge of a razor. The example is very appropriate. One shaves his cheeks with a sharp razor very nicely, but as soon as his attention is diverted from the activity, he immediately cuts his cheek because he mishandles the razor.
Any comments on that? Or you want to give a further explanation of that or add to that? Yes, Advaita Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. So a little experience of shaving that I have.
Uh-huh.
The cuts of the razors are, you can't really tell they're there.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden there's like this blood gushing. So it's very what I'm trying to say, it's very imperceptible, but one can cut himself.
And one does cut themselves.
And you get to realize it just after that's done.
That yeah.
Because it doesn't hurt. It's the razor's edge is very thin, but it goes very deep. And that's where the tissue is damaged.
Yes, yeah. So and that's also indicative of what we were explaining about the results of karmic results of sinful activities. The two results of physical and mental suffering, and then the subtle result of desire to do it again. But the thing is about karma is that it's not immediately manifest. So it's not easy to put two and two together. Oh, because I did this, therefore because I did this, now I'm getting that result, because that result doesn't come the next day or the next minute or the next few seconds. Sometimes it does, but oftentimes there's a space, the time factor there. And that time factor, many people also complain about that too. Why does it have to be like that? Why don't I get immediate results and then I'll know? that I won't do that again. Well, because then it's not so much a learning lesson out of love, it's a learning lesson out of force. The learning lesson was there because if I do this, I get slapped. So therefore, I don't want to get slapped. Therefore, I don't do it. But it's not that I don't do it or I do it or I act properly out of love for the Lord. I'm acting out of fear of the punishment. So that time factor gives, that's why another reason why we need to study, we need to understand, we need to try to comprehend these results of things. Okay, let's just try to finish the purport. Ha ha ha. Can Prabhu, would you like to read now, this time, a little bit of the purport?
Not only must one come to the stage of pure Krishna's consciousness, but one must also be very careful. Any inattentiveness or carelessness may cause fall down. This fall down is due to false ego. From the status of pure consciousness, the false ego is born because of misuse of independence. We cannot argue about why false ego arises from pure consciousness. Factually, there's always the chance that this will happen, and therefore one has to be very careful. False ego is the basic principle for all material activities which are executed in the modes of material nature. As soon as one deviates from pure Krishna's consciousness, he increases his entanglement in material reaction. The entanglement of materialism is the material mind. From this material mind, the senses and material organs become manifest.
So there again, explaining the entanglement of material nature and how one has to be attentive and careful. And therefore, now, practically speaking, bringing it down to like what some lessons that we can gather from this. That's why we have our process of sadhana. It's not just whimsically stated that you should rise early. It's not just whimsically have the rule that you should chant your japa. The best japa is chanted in the early morning, or we have all of these things, and they're all meant. All of these aspects of devotional service that you're living here in the that you're experiencing here in the ashram are meant to fortify the senses, the mind, the intelligence, and the experience of Krishna consciousness, and elevate the consciousness to higher and higher levels. And therefore, we stress the same old things over and over again. Hearing about Krishna. The more that you hear about Krishna, then what's the natural result? The more you'll have something to say about Krishna. You don't hear so much about Krishna, but you listen to the news or whatever. Not even the news, but whatever. And then that's what's in the consciousness. But the more you hear about Krishna, attend the classes and do some reading on your own and listen to kirtans and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, do what you can, then the more your consciousness will be brought to that higher place. And the more that we neglect that, then the consciousness stays in a lower place. So similarly, we have 4 regulative principles. We have the recommendation of chanting 16 rounds. And all of those things are meant to fortify us. And we experience in the association of devotees or in this controlled environment such as this, you can experience the results of it very easily. And then a person might think, well, okay, let me go into this other atmosphere and keep my consciousness purified. That's okay, it's possible. But but you'll see that it's much harder. And unless individually we impose these restrictions or restrictions and recommendations on our own self by our own volition, we're living in our we have our job, we're living independently, etc., etc., because this is just a phase of life, living in the ashram, and then eventually you'll have your own situation. So unless you appreciate the value, and not only just appreciate the value, but actually understand the basis as to why is it recommended to rise early in the morning. Just Drishtadyumna, why is it recommended?
So that we can, so that we are up for the Brahma Muhurta.
What's that?
It's a very spiritually potent time of the day, an hour before sunrise, and there's no distractions of work and everyone awake. It's just a very quiet, peaceful time where we can do our sadhana.
Yeah, thank you. Totally true. And that the spiritual activities done during that time of the day have much more potency. So it's a win-win. Yes, dear.
I can say it later, but
Yeah, but I don't know if they can hear it, whoever that they are listening, meaning. But okay.
did we finish it before?
I didn't hear you?
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
Yes.
I just wanted to add a layer of
Please.
a thought that helps to understand this whole kind of section where it seems very, very technical and external in the Puranas, but the Vedic Puranas are known to be using a lot of external analogies to actually describe an internal process of consciousness and of discovery to help us to explore while we do our own meditation.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems that they're talking about, or that this chapter talks about, it started by today's verse with Hiranmaya and all these technical terms, but actually it is really talking about that we are a pure state of consciousness and how eventually we ourselves become like trapped in enjoyment or whatever it is.
Yes, yes.
The first thing that comes to that pure consciousness is false ego,
Mm-hmm.
the identification with the objects of material things. So, like it's actually like a yogic's map to meditation. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. A nice summary. Nice. Any other comments or questions since it's our time? Yes. You're on track. You're on track. Anyway, Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna, thank you for class. Yeah, I guess you were saying like you're describing like Krishna title thing as the card stack in our favor.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, all this really nice views of how Krishna actually cares about us and loves us. However, nature of the material world is so flickering and unsteady, and it makes me sometimes despondent and like oh my god, like what. So I guess my question is how to have patience, because then at the end, like after a while, I see, oh my god, thank you so much, Krishna, like
Yeah.
thank God that happened like that. And
Yeah.
I'm grateful after the fact, but in the thick of it.
Yeah.
Like how to have patience and not lose enthusiasm.
Yeah, very good, very practical observation and question, and very practical to try to understand. And again, this is why association of devotees is stressed. If you're off by your own, not you, but if a person is off on their own and feeling despondent, then it's like I'm thinking of a Spanish term. They just anyway. It's like it increases. It eats your head, you know. But by remembering and hearing a little bit of why we should be encouraged, then that can dissipate it. And it's not a sign of any um, unusual weakness in the person. It's a natural reaction, and nothing goes steadily upward. It's like it's an uphill step, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward. There's still progress being made. And especially in this stage of unsteadiness in our practice, it takes a while to actually come to that total 100% pure state. So then again, what to do is sometimes maybe when you're taking your notes and you find something inspirational, you could maybe write it down so that in moments like this, you could go back to all these things. Personally, I love these encouraging statements of Srila Prabhupada and Krishna throughout the scriptures. And I always like to focus on them because the mind has its own potency to focus on the bad things. It's very, very potent. Focus on my inability, my defects, my this, my that, my shortcomings. But Krishna's giving us all assurance all the time. And there's story after story after story where Krishna's given the person much more proportionately to then the endeavor that the person made to come towards Krishna. Again, that's that statement that we take one step towards Krishna and Krishna takes 10 steps towards us every single time. You know, he wants us to come back to him. He wants us to be in proper consciousness more than we do. So Srila Rupa Goswami, he gave us in the Nectar of Instruction, he gave us the, what do you call them, the post, the signpost, not the pendulum, the on the road you got the don't go too far to the left, there's a post, and don't go too far to the right. Anyway,
Guardrails.
thank you. Guardrails. Rupa Goswami has given us the guardrails. He says, endeavor with confidence and patience and determination and patience and determination and patience and confidence, you know, but those all, enthusiasm has to be there. Determination has to be there, and patience has to be there because it takes time. It takes some time. So the guardrails are there. So, and then in his other verses, he's saying, okay, associate more with the devotees or give up the association of non-devotees. You know, don't talk about worldly things. Talk about, you know, so all of those little guardrails are there to keep us on the path. But as Advaita was saying, you know, when we were talking about the analogy of devotional services like a razor's edge, yeah, it's easy to slip off that little edge. It's a thin path, and at the same time, it's wide enough to walk on, etc., etc. It's wide enough to have variegated desires in devotional service. I'm just waiting for the plates to come in. Am I right, or should we stop? Okay. Anyway, we can have various desires, but I forgot what I was going to say because I got distracted by prasadam. Hare Krishna. So let's take prasadam or say the prayers or whatever. There, ready. Thank you very kindly. It's a hard section. Mahaprasade Govinde Namo Brahmani Vaishnavi Swapam Punyaritam Vajam Vishwasunyarayate. Fortunate persons will take the Mahaprasad, spiritual food and support. The deity of Sri Govinda, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Transcendental Krishna, and Vaishnavas.
Bhagavad Mahaprasadam ki.
Jai. Hare Krishna.